Welcome to Life Stories Network, where real emotions meet unforgettable journeys. Tonight, I want to share with you something deeply personal, a story that cut me to my core but also gave me strength I never knew I had. It starts with a single sentence that haunted me for years. My parents once told me that I was half the woman my sister is, and in that moment I felt like my entire existence was being measured against her, and I was coming up short. But what they didn't know was that I had a secret. And one night at a family dinner, I revealed it. That secret was worth $84,000. And it changed everything. I grew up in a house where comparisons weren't just occasional, they were daily life. My sister Lily was the golden child. She was beautiful, confident, and seemed to shine in every room she walked into. Teachers adored her, neighbors praised her, and my parents proudly displayed every trophy and certificate she brought home. Me? I was quieter, more reserved, the type to blend in rather than stand out. I worked hard, but it never seemed to be enough to match Lily's glow. Dinner time was the stage for most of these comparisons. We'd sit at the table, and the conversation would somehow circle back to Lily's achievements. Lily got another award. Lily's teacher said she's gifted. Lily looked stunning in her prom dress. And then came the silence that followed as all eyes shifted toward me. No award. No special recognition, just me, breathing, eating, existing. And that was never enough. One evening when I was 16, my father looked straight at me after bragging about Lily's college acceptance letter. He sighed and said, "You know, you'll always be half the woman your sister is." The words pierced me. They weren't just criticism, they were a verdict. In their eyes, I was lesser, and worse, I believed them. I started to shrink into myself, avoiding attention, hiding my true interests because I was terrified they'd mock me for falling short again. But in the quiet of my room, away from the shadow of my sister's spotlight, I discovered something no one knew about. I had a love for creating handmade jewelry. It started small, bending wires, threading beads, experimenting with colors and designs. At first, it was just for me, my little escape. But soon, friends noticed and wanted pieces of their own. Then their friends asked. By the time I was 18, I had an online shop running from my laptop, hidden from my parents because I knew they'd dismiss it as silly. My secret business grew. Orders came in faster than I could keep up with sometimes. I stayed up late, packaging bracelets, necklaces, and rings, shipping them out quietly before anyone woke up. I wasn't making millions, but I was building something of my own. Something that was mine, untouched by Lily's shadow. By the time I turned 23, I had saved $84,000 from my jewelry business. Every penny earned with my hands, my creativity, my perseverance. And no one, especially my parents, had any idea. The turning point came during a family dinner. I was home for the holidays, sitting at the same dining table where I had been belittled for years. As usual, the conversation turned into the Lily show. My mom gushed about her new promotion, my dad beamed about her fiancé, and my aunt kept saying how proud everyone must be of her. Then my mother, almost as if she couldn't resist, turned to me and asked in that sharp tone, "So, what are you even doing with your life these days?" The room went silent, waiting for me to stumble through some unimpressive answer. I felt the old sting of shame rising in my chest. But this time, something inside me snapped. I was tired of being quiet, tired of being invisible, tired of being half. I looked straight at my parents and said, "Well, since you asked, I've been running a jewelry business for the past 5 years, and last year alone I earned $84,000 from it." The clinking of forks and knives stopped. My father's face froze. My mother's eyes widened, and Lily actually dropped her wine glass. The room was silent, except for the pounding of my heart. For once, all eyes were on me. Not with pity or disappointment, but with disbelief. My aunt broke the silence first, stammering, "Did you just say 84,000?" I nodded, my voice steady, though my hands were trembling under the table. "Yes, and I've been saving it. Every dollar came from customers who chose my designs, people who believed in my work. I didn't need applause or a spotlight. I built it on my own." My parents looked at each other, then back at me. They didn't know what to say. My father's lips pressed into a tight line, as though he wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. My mother blinked rapidly, her voice cracking as she asked, Why didn't you ever tell us? And that was the moment I had been waiting for my entire life. I told them the truth. Because you never cared to ask. Because every time I tried to share something about myself, it was brushed aside for Lily's accomplishments. So I stopped trying, but I kept going. I built something in silence because I learned that I didn't need your validation to be whole. The words hung heavy in the air, and for once I didn't feel small. I felt powerful. I felt seen, even if it was through their shock. The silence at that dinner table stretched on like it might never end. I had spoken my truth, and for the first time I didn't feel like a background character in my own family. I watched my parents struggle with the weight of what I'd just revealed. My father cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the conversation. $84,000 is impressive, he muttered, but his tone was flat, like it was painful to admit I had done something significant. My mother forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Well, we're glad you found a hobby. That word, hobby, stabbed deeper than they realized. A hobby doesn't pay for rent, utilities, and groceries. A hobby doesn't bring in more than some full-time jobs. But I kept my composure. I wasn't here to convince them. I was here to stand in my truth. I calmly replied, "It's not a hobby. It's my career. It's my business. And it's my independence." Lily finally broke her silence. She leaned forward, her voice a mix of curiosity and disbelief. "So you're telling us people actually pay that much for beads and strings?" I wanted to laugh, not because it was funny, but because her words echoed the exact kind of dismissal I had feared for years. But this time I was different. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "Yes, people pay for creativity, for quality, for something unique. Maybe you can't see the value, but thousands of customers have." The tension in the room was thick. My aunt shifted uncomfortably, my uncle coughed into his napkin, and my father reached for his glass of water like he suddenly needed to cool down. I felt like I had dropped a grenade in the middle of the family table, and everyone was waiting to see who would pick up the pieces. But instead of shrinking, I leaned in. I began telling them about the process, how I started with simple pieces, how I researched materials, invested hours into learning techniques, and taught myself how to manage an online store. I explained how I marketed my jewelry through social media, took photographs, built relationships with customers, and shipped hundreds of orders. I wasn't boasting, I was sharing my journey. A story they had ignored for years, but one I was no longer going to hide. Lily rolled her eyes, but even she couldn't stop the way the rest of the family was listening. For once, I had their full attention. My aunt even asked, "Could I see some of your work?" I pulled out my phone and showed her photos of my collections. Her jaw actually dropped. "These are beautiful. I'd wear these in a heartbeat." That single compliment nearly brought tears to my eyes. It was the validation I had longed for, not just from her, but from my entire family. And yet, as sweet as it felt, I realized I didn't actually need it anymore. I had already proven to myself that I was more than half. My mother looked at the photos with a strained smile, her pride clashing with old habits of comparison. "They're nice," she said quietly. My father, on the other hand, said nothing. He looked like a man who had been forced to face a truth he didn't want to acknowledge. The rest of the dinner was strange. For once, the spotlight wasn't on Lily. No one asked about her promotion or her fiancé. They asked me questions, real questions, about how I got started, how I kept it going, and what my plans were for the future. And as I answered, I felt my voice grow stronger, my confidence more solid. I was no longer the quiet shadow. I was standing in the light, my own light, and it felt incredible. Later that night, as I was helping clear the table, my mom cornered me in the kitchen. Her voice was softer than usual, almost hesitant. "Why didn't you ever tell us, sweetheart?" I looked at her, and for a moment I saw the mother I wished I had always known. Vulnerable, open, curious, not the one who measured me against Lily. I said, "Because you never gave me space to be myself. Every time I tried, I was compared, and I couldn't keep putting myself through that. So I stopped sharing. I decided I'd rather be invisible to you than be constantly torn down." Her eyes filled with tears, and she whispered, "I didn't realize. I thought pushing you would make you stronger." I shook my head. It didn't make me stronger. It made me feel worthless. What made me stronger was realizing I didn't need your approval to succeed. That night I lay in bed replaying the entire dinner. I thought about the years of silence, the weight of those words, half the woman, and the way they had shaped me. But I also thought about the fire it lit inside me, the stubborn determination that grew in the shadows of comparison. And I realized something important. Maybe I needed that struggle to build the resilience that carried me here. The next morning, something unexpected happened. My dad knocked on my door. He rarely knocked. Usually he just barged in with advice or criticism. But this time he knocked. When I opened the door, he stood there awkwardly, holding a cup of coffee in his hand like a peace offering. He said, "Can we talk?" I nodded, and we sat down. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Then he let out a sigh. I was wrong. About what I said years ago. About you being half the woman Lily is. I didn't see what you were building. I didn't see you. And I'm sorry. Hearing those words after so many years of silence and hurt was overwhelming. My throat tightened, and I could barely whisper back, "Thank you." It wasn't perfect. It didn't erase the years of pain. But it was a start. That morning, he asked me more about my business. He wanted to understand. I explained how I managed inventory, how I priced items, how I kept my customers happy. He listened. Really listened. And when I told him I wanted to expand someday, maybe open a small studio, he didn't laugh. He nodded. It felt like a crack had opened in the wall that separated us. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like half. I felt whole. In the days after that dinner, something shifted in my family dynamic. It wasn't like everything magically healed overnight, but the air felt different. For the first time in my life, I felt like they actually saw me, not as a shadow, not as a comparison, but as myself. Lily, however, didn't take it so easily. A few days later, she cornered me in the living room. She crossed her arms, her tone sharp. "So what? You think you're better than me now because you make some jewelry?" Her words dripped with defensiveness, and I could tell this wasn't about me. It was about her losing the monopoly on our parents' pride. I looked at her calmly. "No, Lily. I don't think I'm better than you. I never wanted to compete with you in the first place. I just wanted to be recognized for who I am," she scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Well, don't get used to the attention. They'll always care more about me." And maybe that was true. Maybe in their eyes she would always shine brighter. But here's what changed. I no longer needed to outshine her. I wasn't chasing their approval anymore. I finally understood that my worth didn't come from their validation. It came from what I had built with my own hands. That realization gave me peace. It also gave me freedom. For years I had carried the wound of their words, letting it define how I saw myself. But now, I was letting it go. A few weeks later, I launched a new collection in my jewelry business. To my surprise, some of my extended family members who had been at that dinner actually became my first customers. My aunt ordered 3 necklaces for her friends, and my cousin bought earrings for his girlfriend. Slowly, even my mom started to ask me questions. Little ones like, "What colors are popular right now?" Or, "How long does it take you to finish a piece?" They weren't big gestures, but they were signs of interest, signs of care. One evening, my dad called me into his study. He pulled out a small box from his desk drawer and handed it to me. Inside was an old gold chain that had belonged to my grandmother. "I think you should have this," he said quietly. "Maybe you can redesign it, give it new life. You'll know what to do." I can't explain how much that meant to me. For years, I felt like the outsider, the forgotten daughter. And now, he was entrusting me with something that carried family history. It wasn't just a chain. It was a gesture of trust. That night, I sat in my room holding that chain, and I realized that the girl who once believed she was half the woman her sister was, had grown into someone whole. Someone who could take brokenness and create beauty, both in jewelry and in life. When I finally redesigned the chain, I made it into a necklace that I wore to our next family dinner. My mom noticed it immediately. "That's beautiful." "Did you make that?" "Yes," I said, touching the pendant lightly. "It was Grandma's. Dad gave it to me." She nodded slowly, her eyes softening. "It suits you." The dinner went on, and though Lily still dominated much of the conversation, something was different. They didn't dismiss me anymore. They asked about my business. They respected my answers. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, and progress was enough. Months later, I hit a new milestone. My online shop crossed 6 figures in total sales. I celebrated quietly, not with champagne or confetti, but with a deep sense of pride. I thought back to that 16-year-old girl sitting at the dinner table, hearing the words that broke her spirit. And I wished I could tell her, one day you'll prove them wrong. But more importantly, you'll prove yourself right. The truth is, my parents' words could have destroyed me. For a long time I let them. But in their dismissal I found motivation. In their comparisons I found independence. And in their silence I found my own voice. That $84,000 secret wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming my identity. It was about showing them, and myself, that I was never half. I was whole all along. Now when I sit at family dinners, I don't shrink anymore. I don't measure myself against Lily's spotlight. I know my own worth, and no one can take that away from me. If you've ever felt like the lesser one, like your light was dimmed by comparisons, I want you to know this. You are not half of anyone. Your worth isn't defined by the trophies on the shelf or the praise at the dinner table. Your worth is built in the quiet hours, in the things you create, in the resilience you carry, and in the way you keep moving forward even when no one notices. Because one day, they will notice. And when they do, you'll already know who you are. That's what happened to me. My parents once told me I was half the woman my sister was. But the truth? I was always whole, and I always will be.